Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Cocktails and Rocktails with me, your most notorious groupie, Alice Rouse, author of this little biggie book right here. These are the ones right there as well, you guys. Where you can get this book, only half the story. I stop at 2002. That's not even half the story about before 2002. My next book, which is slowly being written, will follow my life after 2002. Because a lot of people think I stopped being a groupie after John passed away. No, no, no. These are friends for the rest of my life. You know, these are people that, I mean, not all of them, obviously. A small percentage of them I'm still friends with, still like to hang out and enjoy their company and stuff. So 2002 and on, that's coming out soon, you guys. All right, and as always, I'd like to thank everybody so much for all the love, all the support, all the friendships. Again, as always, I know I totally suck at getting back to emails, but just bear with me. I'm going to take a day or two just to answer emails, so I will get back to you guys. Doesn't mean I don't love you and appreciate you and enjoy our conversations, because you guys, you know I do. I'm so happy of the family we're building here and all the fun we're having sharing conversations. So you guys, thank you so much for all the love, all the support, and welcome to all the amazing new people. Thank you so much for helping make this channel what it is. And what this channel is about, you guys, we like to talk about a lot of different women in the history of music or pop culture. And today is no different. We're going to combine, again, rock and roll meets art, meets socialite, meets the original millionaire heiress socialite, who was known for just being a socialite. Was not Paris Hilton, was it? Because today, you guys, we are going to talk about none other than Edie Sedgwick. And we're also going to kind of talk about Andy Warhol and everything to go on with that. And we are bringing back my Sophia, because you know how much I love her. And we're just going to be going with a little hot chocolate and the bullet bourbon, because it's my favorite winter drink. And it is winter. It is foggy. And I need a little bit of Sophia. So everybody, grab your bullets, kick up your feet. Let's have a little cocktails and rocktails with you, me, and Sophia. Cheers, big ears. Add hazelnut. So this is how you make it. Use a bourbon, or you can use Jameson Irish whiskey, which is really good. I personally like a bourbon. Some hazelnut cream, some hot chocolate with the marshmallows in it. Oh, delicious, you guys. All right, and speaking of delicious, Edie Sedgwick has left such a huge mark on pop culture, on society, on women, on just so much stuff. Andy Warhol. A lot of people say that because of her, Andy Warhol really was pushed up to that next level. Is it true? I don't know, but I think he definitely became more when he met her. Like, he became this pop culture. He was already a pop culture phenomenon, but I think he became more of societal, like more accepted into that high society, old school money, because Edie Sedgwick was born into old school money. She was a great granddaughter of a signer of the Declaration of Independence. I am as well. She was, oh God, what was Emerson or something? I'm Oliver Walcott, direct descendant of him. So a lot, and this used to mean something really important back in the day. It meant old money, it meant prestige, it meant all kinds of things. And Edie kind of grew up in a family where she was the 7th out of 8 children of a very tough father who, and I think this kind of would come into play with her and Andy Warhol, because Andy Warhol was 15, 16 years older than Edie Sedgwick. And a lot of people don't know that. They think that they were the same age, but no. So Edie was kind of, like I said, she was born in 420 of 1943, the 7th child of this family. And they all suffered, every one of the siblings suffered some sort of abuse or horrific, what's the word? Horrific victim. I mean, they were just really victims of a shit dad who tried to crawl into places with Edie that he should not have been, starting at the age of 7 years old. So that kind of really set the tone for her life in a lot of ways, because you have this trauma, you have this fight. And she was very close with certain siblings, especially a couple brothers, who would later come to tragic ends. But she was very close with them, and I think they all bonded really more over how abusive that their father allegedly was. So we have to say allegedly, but and the things that he tried to do to Edie. So this really sets the tone with kind of her life and kind of a lot of things. Also because some years later, when she was about 13, she walked in. Her father was a notorious womanizer, like a lot of men of power and money were in those days. Walked in on her and her father and the neighbor lady, having a little more than afternoon tea. I don't think you drink tea from between someone's legs. Yep. Or from a guy's nose. That's not how you get tea, people. Trust me. Ask Kip Winger. Woof. Anywho, so she walked in on that, and her father immediately started giving her tranquilizers, sent her off to the Silver Lake Asylum, and said it never happened, tried to brainwash her. Oh no, you were just imagining things. You were so doped up. So again, this started, and this kind of went on in those years. You look at Elizabeth Taylor, Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe. People just fed you pills, gave you barbiturates, and told you it never fucking happened. Just be back to the workhorse, whatever. So this kind of fell into that time where she was going through this and told she was crazy and stupid from the very beginning. And I think her relationship with Andy Warhol kind of, in a way, mimicked a little bit of her and her father's relationship. Because, as much as a creative genius that Andy Warhol was made out to be, he wasn't a great person. But anyway, so she was sent to this asylum, Silver Lake, which would play out in and out of her life. And told she was a liar, told she was horrific, that she was just drugged up, and, kind of to try and break free, bitch. There's nothing you can do attitude toward her, which is horrible. And back then nobody said anything. Like her mother knew, because she's on film saying this stuff, that her mother knew and nobody did anything, and people just drank and gave pills and turned a blind eye. So finally, years later, she escapes. She goes, and I say escapes, but I think she was in the mental institution one more time because she kept being sent to private schools. Her father, Fuzzy, as she called him, would send her away because, no, she's got her eyes open. She sees who I am. She sees what I'm doing. So what are we going to do? We're going to get rid of her. We're just going to send her off. And she would go into bulimia and anorexia, and schools would send her back. They would send her back to Silver Lake. And then they would send her to New York to another mental institution that was somehow associated with Silver Lake, I believe. And she started to get better. Her anorexia started to do better. So she ended up going to Cambridge with a friend or a cousin who they studied art and sculpture and everything together. Well, when she was 20 years old, she inherited an $80,000, what would be equal to $800,000 in these days, inheritance from her grandmother. She inherited this money from her grandmother, so she saw it as the first time that she could be free. She's got her own money. She knows she's not going to get anything from her father and her mother, who was always turning a blind eye, and not a whole lot said about her mother, so I couldn't really find too much on her mother or what her mother was doing. I didn't see too much in the movies and stuff that where Edie is talking about this, that really said, what was your mother doing? So how that played a role, I don't know, because she seemed to seek solace or attention or validation in more men than she did women. So that tells me that maybe her mother was somewhat of a solace, but not really, because moms weren't, especially in old money and family like that. So here comes this California girl from Boston old money going to New York. She gets better. Her anorexia starts to get better. She goes to Cambridge, inherits this money, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to New York. I want to go be myself, be somebody. I want something more in life. She needs the attention. She's craving so much more. And everybody, even before, who knew her before Warhol, said, so many men were so attracted to her, but she never realized her beauty, and everybody wanted her. And this definitely came into play because she said herself in an interview after the Warhol years, not long before she passed away, that she never realized her beauty, her makeup, her iconic look and everything was her mask that she put on her face to hide what she thought was ugly. Because, of course, growing up in a house like she did, she's probably not going to get a whole lot of self-esteem, a lot of love, a lot of... And I think that was something she craved so much. And she kept finding more and more false love along the way. So she goes to New York, ends up in a Tennessee, and she's got this beautiful long brown hair, her big brown eyes, her tiny little frame, skinny, skinny, skinny. So she goes to a party with Tennessee Williams, who Andy Warhol was a definite groupie for, not Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote. Excuse me. So he goes to a party for Truman Capote, and Andy Warhol had previously been kind of a stalker of Truman Capote's. He wanted to be like Truman Capote. He even started dressing like him and sending him letters and showing up at his house and trying to talk to him for years and years and years. And Truman Capote just blew him off, just rejected him. And this would play a lot of the role in how Andy Warhol was throughout his lifetime, throughout his years, and how he approached not just his art, which I think his art was mainly kind of throwing society a big fuck you for rejecting him, because I'm not the biggest Andy Warhol fan. I don't think his art, I think what he did was change an attitude with his art. He wasn't a great artist, but he was a great surveyor of human behavior and human, what's the word? We relate to certain things, and things that make us like the Campbell Soup Can. We all think of, ooh, yummy tomato and cheese, grilled cheese sandwiches. It gives us that kind of very down-home feeling. And Andy tapped into that. That's what everybody, why he was such a great artist. And this will play into Edie Sedgwick, because when he saw her at that Truman Capote party, he looked at her, he said, this is a beautiful woman who had everything in the world, but was so tragic. He's like, I was intrigued. And I think he wanted to be her, because he would go through a succession of different people like Truman Capote. And then he came into, Velvet Underground and Nico, but that was after Nico came along. Because what you don't realize is Edie Sedgwick and Andy Warhol had such a short time in this, just, shooting star that just faded out so quick. It was 1 year, little less than 1 year. So he sees her, he's instantly intrigued. She goes to the factory. She had decided to cut her brown hair, and she said she couldn't find any blonde spray for her hair because she really wanted blonde hair. She wanted that pixie cut. Had nothing to do with Andy Warhol, but had to do with just what she wanted to be from the inside. So she goes and she couldn't find any blonde hairspray, so she goes and buys the silver. So her and Andy just kind of look alike. He's intrigued with her. He falls in love with her because I think he sees what he on the inside wanted to be. Because when Andy was younger, he was sick, and that's how he got his pockmarked and kind of scarred skin on his face. He got a really kind of powder-like, very non-pigmented skin color, and he was also extremely sensitive to touch, which kind of leads me to believe that did he have a lot of, and this is something I haven't delved into as far, because like I said, I'm not that interested in Andy Warhol. I'm interested in the dynamics that he created and got people to do things, and how he kind of played on that familiarity with society and kind of put a big fuck you in a different way. But so she shows up, and the next thing you know, she's in this black dress with that leopard print belt. We all know that iconic scene for that movie that she did for him, where she just sort of had a 5-minute cameo, and it was really compared to like Marilyn Monroe, who was an idol of hers. She wanted to be like Marilyn Monroe. She wanted to be famous. She wanted to be adored. She wanted to be chased after, so she was really being compared because Marilyn Monroe had passed away a few years earlier, and hadn't really replaced her with somebody that was such a pop culture phenomenon like Marilyn Monroe was. Jane Mansfield, she was that big-breasted blonde, but she was more of a cult follower rather than that big pop culture takeover. And, whoa, sorry, tablets and stuff and computers go off. But, so here she was hooking up with Andy Warhol. They went to Paris together immediately, and Andy just fell even more in love with her because she just had on her typical leotard with the stockings, that super duper micro mini dress, her beautiful black eyes, big brown eyes with all the black and the extra long, and her chandelier earrings, and all she had in this tiny, tiny suitcase was another fur coat. This is according to Andy Warhol. So he was like, I was just so entranced by her. And then they started calling her poor little rich girl, which to me was kind of an insult because she was so tragic. And this is where I personally believe that, this is my opinion, that Andy Warhol, when he saw her and he saw the tragedy in her and he saw the fear, that he just latched onto that to suck her in and, to make her think that everything that she did was her identity, her fame, because all of a sudden she was named the It Girl by Life magazine in 1965. Her and Andy Warhol were doing everything together. They went on the Merv Griffith show, and Andy Warhol would barely even answer anything, and Edie was speaking for him, and she said, I'm going to speak for you, for Andy. He's not going to talk very much. He's just quiet and shy. So I'm going to talk for him. So this Merv Griffith, it was basically, I think she thought that if it wasn't for Andy, she wouldn't be who she was, because she got involved with Andy at the Warhol, and she kind of really, but she was already really kind of into society anyway. She was already modeling, doing a little bit of acting before she met Andy. I think she might have been there no matter what, because she just had that look. She had that vulnerability. She had that brightness of being free for the first time, and not having to answer to anybody. And she was only 20 years old. And here she is traveling the world with this big famous artist, with all these cool rock friends, from Velvet Underground to Truman Capote to, Jackson Pollock, which I personally am more of a fan of Jackson Pollock than I am Warhol. So she gets involved with Andy, and they're just talking on the phone every night. He's adoring her. He's putting her in her movies. They're doing all this press together. They're going to parties. And they were like, if these two aren't at your party, it's not a party. You guys have failed in society. If they are here, it is the place to be. And she was just having a good time. But I think she felt very dependent because Andy did this to quite a few people. I think his true art was very sinister. I think his art really had more to do with what he could get people in real life to do. Like have Edie Sedgwick, you see in the last film that Lupe was kind of the last film that they did together. They had done another one, but it was never finished or released. But Beauty number 2, he has her making out, and I don't think she wanted to. There's a guy who was in Andy Warhol's factory that did the lighting, that had designed all the silver. I forget his name. The brags that he was the one that brought all the drugs, that brought that sinister crowd, that brought that negativity, that addict behavior, that childish bullshit behavior. And he laughs. He's like, yeah, I'm responsible. Fuck yeah, I am. Which, again, I think kind of helped play up the narcissistic qualities that Andy Warhol had and his insecurities, because he wanted to be that socialite. I think he wanted to be Jackie O. He wanted to have a little bit of Marilyn, a little bit of Edie, a little bit of Nico, a little bit of Elizabeth, I think because he had grown up so isolated in Poland, before they moved to the United States, and just looking at all these magazines and the stars and wanting to escape that dreadful reality, your typical, baby boomer, World War II child story, right? But I think he was so insecure and that he couldn't be who he wanted he wanted to be someone on the inside that he could not be on the outside, like we can gladfully these days. So Andy everybody around him, he gave their name. He gave their identity. He gave his permission for them to be who they were. But the second, he felt slighted or he felt like he wasn't getting the attention he wanted, he'd turn on you like a dime. Because, one day, Edie Sedgwick and Bob Dylan has denied all these claims. Edie Sedgwick meets Bob Dylan. They're mutual friends. And she starts hanging around him. And, according to certain people, it was kismet at first sight. There was just, and I could see why Dylan would want to deny these claims because, number one, he was dating someone else that he married later on that year at the end of 1965. Sarah, who I believe is his, oh my God, what's his son's name? One Headlight, Cinderella, Come Together. Why can I not think of his name? But you know who I mean. So anyway, and I think they did, in my opinion, have a relationship that was, kind of like the road wife, that Edie was everything he wanted on the road, but he did not like the factory scene. He was not impressed with it. And when he came to the factory, like, things were already kind of going a little bit tense because Edie started to fight back. Edie started to eclipse the limelight over Andy Warhol. And everybody in the factory, no, this to me was kind of a cult because you couldn't eclipse Andy. You could enhance him and he could make you who you were, but you could not eclipse him. And Edie started eclipsing him. So by the time Dylan came along, I think that Edie kind of Andy was already things were already strained. So he felt even more slighted because here she is hanging out with Bob Dylan. Supposedly she was the inspiration, her and Andy in that relationship that he didn't like, but Edie couldn't let go of. And she was stuck between both the Dylan world, which was anti-Warhol world, even though he was there and hanging out. He was known to not really give a fuck about that world. It was all fake. It was all bullshit. Because Andy seemed to surround himself with different heiresses as far as the women goes, and men he wanted to, piddle and diddle as far as the men goes. So I think he had to have a certain quality of people around him to make himself feel superior because growing up he never did. So he had Edie so manipulated and be like, she would come to the factory after starting to hang out more and more in Bob Dylan's circle, who she did date a friend of Bob Dylan's as well, Mike Newsmeyer. I'll put the picture here. But anyway, so she started dating him as well, but she had also, because I think she was truly in love with Bob Dylan. I think that was the love of her life. I think that was the one person. She didn't have to be the heiress. She didn't have to be Edie Sedgwick, the pop icon. She didn't have to be Warhol's muse. She didn't have to be Fuzzy's victim. Or, because I never really got to see any of her art. It's like she wanted to be the artist, but then she became the puppet, so to speak. Andy Warhol's puppet. So the more she spent with Bob Dylan, I think the more she discovered with herself. And in that crowd, I think she discovered of her true self and true friends and what that was supposed to be. And that angered him because then Andy Warhol started turning on her. Like she comes back after being gone for a couple weeks, hanging out with the Dylan crowd, doing her own thing, doing interviews, being the pop icon, being the muse, whatever. So she comes back and there's a scene in Factory Girl where he's got Ingrid Superstar dressed like Edie doing the exact same interview that she did. That first one that he did with Poor Little Rich Girl in her apartment. She was given the same answer she was making, and everybody was making fun of her. Like this is fucking junior high because Andy Warhol was being cold. So that was the cue to treat her like shit. So that fucked up because like I said, as far as the Warhol and Edie relationship goes, I think she was so happy to have this man that was so pleased with her, so enamored, so adoring of her, even though it was his own ego and from his own narcissism, because she wished she had that with her father that she never had. Because like I said, that age gap. And I think she kind of viewed Andy as her adult father, her cultural iconic father, that really was just a narcissistic piece of shit who fucked with so many people. Ask Nico. look, there are tons of people from Warhol's that were just twisted. Like I said, that guy's so proud that he brought the drugs and the sinister, and because that changes people. And when they were filming, there was another one that they filmed, that Beauty Number Two. Andy was just hitting every little nerve, every psychological, painful moment, that Edie had told him in those many nights on the phone, or when she went to dinner at his house with his mother, which he never brought anybody home because his mother didn't know that Andy Warhol was gay. And so I think she was finding some validation in that. And then when he turned on her like a dime, it fucked with her so bad mentally. She started getting even worse into barbiturates because she was introduced to the drugs that guy brought into the Andy Warhol scene. And how did she put it? She's like, she grew up to be a beautiful, normal drug addict or something like that. Again, that's what she said in her interview. She grew up to be a beautiful drug addict. So she was taking all these drugs and people were kind of robbing her blind, as she started, because in 1 year, she ran out of that $80,000. Like I said, that's $800,000. I could live quite a few years off that. I could live 4, 5, 6, 7 years off that, So, I mean, we can all make that work pretty comfortably, even today's prices, but anyway, so the more she started running out of money, he would humiliate her in public. When she would go meet up with him at the restaurant, oh, I saw you guys were here. So, because she would pay for everything. But once that money started running out, once she started, falling in love with Bob Dylan, once she started dating other people, and Andy Warhol was not the center of her life, and he wasn't manipulating her to be on some bed with a guy in her underwear, and speaking of where I was going with this, sorry, I went off into a tangent. But where I was going with this, she was on the bed for that Beauty Number Two movie. And Andy Warhol's standing off in the background. She's making out with the guy just like she's supposed to be. She's whacked out on barbiturates, high as hell, probably not even really realizing what was happening. She's not paid for any of these movies like she's supposed to be. She's not modeling because she's too busy being Andy Warhol's puppet. So she's this guy and this was absolutely 100% from Andy Warhol's direction. At some point, Andy told him to ask her things about her father that were very triggering. And you can see her get up and she's like, no, what the fuck? And she starts just telling him off. And I think that was her epiphany moment. That, wait a minute. This is no different than my life growing up with Fuzzy, with her father. This is no different than... And during this time, her brother, like the year before, had committed self-unaliving after he'd come out to his father, like the next day. And at the end of 1965, her brother, another brother that she was extremely close to, had passed away because his motorcycle hit a bus head on, or the side, like just rammed right into it. So that was supposedly intentional. So she was messed up from that too. And Andy Warhol sitting there taking advantage. And then when she's done serving his purpose, that he realized he's not going to be her. He starts moving on to other people. He starts manipulating other people who are making fun of her, who are being rude to her, who are being snide to her in a place where she felt like safe and comfortable for the first time in her life, where she felt like she could just be herself and this is who she was. And supposedly, according to the movie The Factory Girl, again, Bob Dylan denies any relationship. Bob Dylan said walk away from it, and she couldn't do it. Because I think, like I said, I think she thought she owed her identity to Andy Warhol and she would be nothing without him. When in reality, he didn't really start, like he was already had a name for himself, but the money really didn't start rolling in until Edie came along with her old money society, friends of her mother's, other heiresses and stuff, and they started just snapping up that work like no tomorrow. And he was like, no, I'm just going to concentrate on films. I'm done painting, and just... So I think a lot of who Andy Warhol was during that time was due to Edie, because he was all of a sudden this media darling, but in one way he hated it because he was so shy. But Edie was this outgoing, just burst of energy and starshine. So I think he lived vicariously, but once he was done using her, as narcissists go, he abused her. Verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically, had other people doing it for him. And that's why I think, Andy Warhol's true ambition in life was to be worshipped as a cult leader and to twist people around to see how far he could destroy them or make them and destroy them later. So as an artist, I can see where he fits into the progression of art and people think he's great, but as a human being, he was total shit. And a lot of people have said that who were part of the factory. He was insecure. He looked down on you. He was passive aggressive. He would mutter under his breath horrible fucking things. And Edie was definitely the target. So, and she went on to try and model and do more movies. She was filming a movie, Chow Manhattan, but it had to be shut down because she just looked like shit. If you look at a couple of these pictures, she looked horrible. She was bruised. You could see where she was shooting up the barbiturates and stuff. She was just nodding out and typical, this is the domino effect that Andy Warhol ended up giving her because he liked to manipulate people and fuck with their emotions and fuck with their dirty, dark secrets and fuck with their insecurities and their triggers. He thought that was just the best thing to do because that's what he had. That's how he said, fuck you to people and fuck you to society. So after all that, when they shut down because she was still trying to act and model and she was still kind of making some money and able to support herself, not going home. But because of all that, they shut down Chow Manhattan, which was kind of loosely based on her in the biography. And by Manhattan, it's time for her to go somewhere else. So where does she go? Back to California, back to Silver Lake. Meets a man named Michael. This is many years later because by the end of 1965, beginning in 1965, she was the it girl. By the end, her and Andy's relationship was done. It was over. Kaput. She was just replaced by Twiggy. She was forgotten. Newspapers about her rolled up and thrown into the trash bin, and she was shunned by Andy Warhol. And she begged him to stop distributing the movies because it made her look like a fool. It made her, she didn't realize, until she got so sober, and he refused. And he paid her $1 once and said, there you go, now you've been paid. I mean, that's how condescending and bullshit he was, because she was like, you're not paying me for my work. I need to do something. And he was mad because she was trying to go model and do other acting. And then when she got onto the Chow and she went home, she got sober. She married, Michael, a gentleman she met in rehab. And she was actually released from rehab into the custody of the director and the writer for the movie Chow Manhattan, which they ended up filming because she was in and out after, and this is after she married Michael in 1969. So in 1971, she was released to the filmmaker. They finished the movie November. Her husband she had called because she was at a fashion show, something to do with the movie in Santa Barbara, Santa Monica, and one of the two places. But she called him and she was like, yeah, can you come get me? I've been drinking. I just can't drive. So he comes and gets her. They go to bed. He notices her breathing is a little bit off, but he just thinks it's because of the heavy smoking that she does. So it sounds like there's a hole in her lung. He described it. And then he woke up the next morning, much like I did with John, and found her. She had passed away of a barbiturate overdose. And she was only 28 years old. 28. But yet she still is an icon because her association with Warhol, when in reality, I think Warhol was more the icon because of his association with her. I think Andy Warhol definitely manipulated her and was one of the many catalysts in her life to drive her to drugs, to drive her to drinking, to drive her to excess, and no matter whether it was excess in joy or in pain or in fame or in attention or being the queen bee of the factory, because she was just tossed to the side by so many people and told she was wrong, and you aren't who you think you are. You're not seeing what you think you're seeing. She was told she was a piece of shit by so many people she loved and looked up to, and she lost people that she loved, that she trusted, and everybody else just kind of threw her to the wolves when they were done with her. Even Bob Dylan, because let's face it, I do think Rolling Stone and Blonde on Blonde both were inspired. That whole album, definitely, because, and it was Andy Warhol who at the end of 1965 showed her a newspaper that, oh, look, your little lover got married. Ha ha ha. Shoved it in her face and, really got on one of her nerves over it intentionally and maliciously, because that's just what he did. So I think between, she trusted Bob Dylan, but like I said, I think she was more the road wife, like I was for certain musicians, not married at the time, but anyway. So you have your home life and you have your road life, and she was the road wife of the road life. For Bob Dylan, I do 100% think that that's what she was for him, for Bob Dylan, and that the Blonde on Blonde album was kind of slam and a reference to her and Andy Warhol, because they had their matching little silver blonde bad hairdos, her spray and his shitty wigs, and that several of the songs are just like Andy Warhol told the guys in Velvet, Lou Reed, you need to write a song about Edie. And Lou's like, well, what should I write? And he was like, well, she's a femme fatale. Femme fatale right there. So, I do believe that she did have a relationship with Bob Dylan. I do believe he kind of treated her, he lied about it to save his own ass and married Sarah later that year because he was seeing them both. I think that she was just, somebody said when you were with Edie Sedgwick, time stopped. Wow, that's something to say about someone, because it means you're just so engrossed in that moment, that you're so into this world and you're so into their beauty and their aura and their energy, that you just, nothing else matters, And I see Bob Dylan, I see that Andy did that, I see that her other lovers and relationships and friends did that, but like I said, it's just like a shooting star, it all faded, and she was tossed to the side. I think the guy she married in rehab was probably the only one that didn't toss her to the side, but how scary was that for him that, his wife didn't wake up that morning. He heard her breathing, because I know how that is. I heard John breathing, just like he did, and she was only 28. And the film Ciao Manhattan was released posthumously. That, I believe, the January or February of 1972, because she died November 1971. So I just think that between Andy Warhol, between her father, between her mother, between other people in her life, even the guys that Andy Warhol, because Andy Warhol would tell guys to go onto the screen and kind of see how far they could touch her and she would hit him off. And, he tried to basically by proxy SA her. So that just fucked her up her whole life. And trying to escape from those memories, she just never could kick that barbiturate habit. And the drinking and the smoking, and yeah, that's what ended her, at too young of an age. I would like to see the woman she might have become, and maybe become the artist that she wanted to be, and become the actress without having to be the it girl, because there's a difference between being a great actress and a great artist and being the it girl. The it girl, by definition alone, is fleeting, because you only have one it girl a year. And she was on magazines. She was, and even in Vogue, Diane Vreeland, I think her name was at the time, she was the editor of Vogue. She called her a youth hooligan or something like that because of the barbiturates. I can't remember the word she used, but she was kind of, everybody thought she was just a parody. She was just that it girl that was disposable at the end of 1965 and next one in, which was really sad, because I don't think she was, and I don't. be the true artist that she was meant to be. I would have loved to have seen a lot more stuff of hers. And I just think that's fucked up that that's who Andy Warhol is. And he's so, like I said, his art is okay. I understand where it comes from. It just does not resonate to me because it shows me his insecurities of who he wanted to be. And unfortunately, at the time, he couldn't be himself. He had to hide all that because there was legal, criminal, societal persecutions, you know? Where we are. Jesus fucking Christ. Thought we had outgrown that shit. And I mean the persecuting. Be who you are. Be true to who you are. Because then you won't be some narcissistic, manipulative fuck like Andy Warhol was. Because like you see, not too many people stayed in his circle very long that were their own independent intelligence and had lives outside of the factory. And he just churned those people in and out like a meat cleaver, like you see in Pink Floyd. You know, the wall and the kids are walking in and they're just being churned out. Just into blobs of meat. So I think poor Edie, she had an amazing kind heart and soul, and she wanted so bad to feel that love from somebody, anybody, especially when she was only 21, 22. She was so young. She was 20 and 21 when she was with Andy Warhol. And she was 22 by the time she was washed up by Andy Warhol, where she was being treated like crap, where she was being mocked, where she was being manipulative and passive-aggressive quips and just ridiculous stuff. Here she was on this high thinking she found people that were like her second family that she could trust, and then here goes that rug. That's who Andy Warhol was. She wasn't the only one. So, but I don't think we should forget Edie Sedgwick because, like I said, people often think that Paris Hilton was the original high society, just wild, crazy debutante that was just famous for nothing. Really. For just being a muse or being stylish or her chandelier earrings or her pixie cut. No, that happened long before Paris Hiltons or the Kardashians or people like that. Well, the Kardashians were never society grand dames, you know, they only got famous off a sex tape. But then again, Andy Warhol did too. Let's face it. I think he liked voyeurism, but I think he liked voyeurism in the way that you can manipulate people to get what you wanted them to do sexually, among other things. So I don't think we should forget Edie Sedgwick because she was such a really great soul. Like if you listen to one of her last interviews, she went back to her brown hair and her big brown eyes, no makeup, especially in Chow Manhattan. I loved her look in Chow Manhattan because that was her truest self. That's who she was before Warhol. And had she not been at the party that night, maybe things were different. Had she been able to stay sober, which was not a huge priority for back then, I think things would have been different had she had the support that she was always craving and looking for. But she was just a little girl lost. She was poor little rich girl to those guys. And, they just said it so condescending. But as long as she was paying for their ride, cool beans. As long as she sold art for Andy, cool beans. But the second she fell in love with Bob Dylan, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you from every direction. Including Bob Dylan. Because, she also said, because she told her brother that she had been pregnant and lost the baby and said it was Bob Dylan's. Still, Bob Dylan denies all this, but I tend to believe Edie Sedgwick. So there was another tragedy that she went through, lost that, and then he marries someone else that she didn't know that he had at home. And the women at home probably didn't know about Edie Sedgwick. Well, they were being photographed together and stuff, but that could be easily explained off as, no, don't believe everything you see in the photographs. They manipulate them. So, I just think she spent too much time being disposed of by the people she loved the most and she put all of her trust in. And she could feel she could fly and be her most true self. And they were just abusive of her true self. So we cannot forget who she was and see her for the beauty and see her for the vulnerability and see her for the strength she had every day to get up and to be who she was when she first flew free, and that she was a victim. And she did get out of that for the most part. Well, marrying normal and just being a normal woman and being in the films and actually pursuing her own interests while fighting her own demons, she needs to be remembered for that. But there you guys go. Let me know what you think kind of Andy Warhol, because like I said, I think Andy Warhol just kind of ran with more manipulation and just destroyed her as a young woman and just made her feel like she was worthless. I just think Andy Warhol took advantage of a lot of people. That's why I'm not a big fan of hers. And I think had she kind of had she not gotten, I wonder what she would have been individually had she not got with Andy Warhol. I think she still would have been the it girl, because I think as a model and actress, she was still getting a lot of attention at the time. She just sold herself short to the wrong people. So, props and cheers to Edie Sedgwick, because I think she could have been so much more had people not manipulated her mentally and emotionally and drug-wise. So, all right, you guys, tell me what you guys think down in the description or in the comments. Anyway, tell me what you think down in the comments, you guys. Tell me what you think of Andy Warhol or Edie Sedgwick, or things that I didn't touch up on here that I might have forgotten because I watched several things and tried, did a lot of research. But we're going to talk about Nico next, because like I said, I think Andy Warhol collected people he wanted to be. And then when they, showed any independence outside of him, blick, he just fucked them over. And I think he played chess with people as a form of shits and giggles. So tell me what you guys think down in those comments. Tell me what you think of this episode. Tell me what more you want to hear. If I haven't touched up on something, go down in that description and tell me all about it. All right, you guys, and thank you guys who made it to the end of the video. You guys are awesome. You rock. You really would mean the world, because I know a huge percentage does not make it to the end of the video. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoy, my love for everything, art, music, culture. It's a lot of fun in a non-Kardashian way, because I think there's so much more that is more substance than that kind of crap. So, all right, you guys, and for those of you just lurking, go down, hit that share, hit my like, hit my bells, become a member here at Cocktails and Rocktails. We'll see you next time. Cheers, big ears.